Juliet stretched on the soft couch, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on her skin. Life had changed so much since she met David. From struggling to survive to now living in comfort, it felt like a dream. But deep inside, she knew, peace never lasted long. David walked into the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was tight, his usual calmness replaced with something unreadable. "Are you sure?" he asked the person on the line. A long pause. Then, he cut the call and exhaled sharply. "What's wrong?" Juliet asked, sitting up. David hesitated, then sat beside her. "Someone is after me again." Her heart skipped. "Scarface is dead. Who else would want to hurt you?" David rubbed his face. "That's what I'm trying to find out. But this time, it's bigger than before." Before Juliet could respond, a *** loud knock *** echoed through the house. Tunde rushed in, panting. His face was pale. "David. Juliet. We have a problem. Here is *** Season 3, Episode 2, *** enjoy the suspense." Smirking face fire. Juliet's heart pounded as she looked at Tunde. "What do you mean we have a problem?" Tunde shut the door behind him and took a deep breath. "David, someone powerful is digging into your past. They're looking for weaknesses." David frowned. "Who?" Tunde hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed David a ** photo **. David's face darkened immediately. Juliet peeked at the screen. It was a ** woman ** tall and elegant, dressed in an expensive suit. Her cold eyes sent a chill through Juliet's spine. "Who is she?" David clenched his jaw. "My stepmother." Juliet's eyes widened. "Your stepmother?" David stood up, pacing. "She never liked me. After my father died, she wanted full control of the wealth. I thought she had let go, but if she's back, it means one thing, she's coming for everything." Tunde nodded. "She has resources, David. She's already bribing people, digging into Juliet's past, into your connections. If we don't act fast, she'll destroy everything." Juliet swallowed hard. First, Scarface. Now this. It was like trouble never ended. David turned to her, his eyes full of determination. "We won't let her win." But deep inside, Juliet had a bad feeling. This wasn't just about money. Something darker was coming. Juliet sat quietly, her mind racing. She could see the tension in David's eyes as he stared at the floor. His stepmother was no ordinary woman. If she had decided to come after him, then she had a plan. Tunde paced near the window. "She has already started working. I spoke to one of my guys, and he said she's meeting with powerful people. She wants to take over everything, and she's not afraid to get her hands dirty." Juliet felt a chill. "What do you mean by not afraid?" David sighed. "She once tried to poison me when I was a teenager. She wanted me out of the way so she could control my father's empire. But I survived, and she acted like nothing happened. My father knew but didn't want to cause a scandal." Juliet's chest tightened. "So she's capable of anything?" Tunde nodded. "And now, she's targeting you too, Juliet." Juliet froze. "Me? But why?" "She knows you're David's weakness. If she can't get to him, she'll go through you." David clenched his fists. "I won't let that happen." Tunde's phone rang. He checked the screen and his expression changed. "It's one of my guys. I need to take this." He walked to a corner, his voice low as he spoke. Juliet turned to David. "What do we do?" Before David could answer, a loud bang sounded outside the house. Juliet's heart jumped. Tunde ended his call quickly. "We need to leave. Now." David grabbed Juliet's hand. "She's already making her move." Juliet's breath caught in her throat as fear gripped her. Everything was happening too fast. David's stepmother wasn't wasting time. And now, they were officially in danger. Juliet's hands shook as David pulled her towards the back door. Tunde was already ahead, peeking outside to check if the coast was clear. The night air felt heavy, as if something dangerous was waiting for them in the shadows. "We can't use the cars," Tunde whispered. "They might have people watching." Juliet's heart pounded. "Then how do we leave?" David looked around, his mind working fast. "There's an old service gate at the back. If we can get through, we can take a cab from the next street." Tunde nodded. "Let's move, but quietly." Juliet followed closely, her breath shaky. She had never been in this kind of situation before. Just a few months ago, her biggest problem was struggling to survive. Now, she was caught in a dangerous game involving powerful people. They reached the service gate. Tunde pushed it open slowly, making sure there was no one outside. The street was empty, just dim streetlights casting shadows on the ground. David led the way, keeping a firm grip on Juliet's hand. The three of them walked fast but tried not to look suspicious. Juliet's ears were sharp, listening for any strange sounds. They had barely made it to the main road when a black SUV with tinted windows drove past them slowly. The car didn't stop, but Juliet felt the eyes watching them from inside. Tunde pulled out his phone. "I'll order a cab." David shook his head. "Not here. We need to keep moving. We don't know if we're already being followed." Juliet swallowed hard. "Where are we even going?" David squeezed her hand. "Somewhere safe. I won't let anything happen to you." Juliet wanted to believe him, but the fear in his eyes told her this was far from over. Tunde kept looking over his shoulder as they walked. The black SUV had disappeared, but something felt off. Juliet could feel it too. David finally stopped at a small park. The streetlights flickered slightly, casting shadows on the ground. He turned to Tunde. "Call the driver now." Tunde nodded and stepped aside to make the call. Juliet's mind was racing. She had only wanted to help a man who seemed lost, and now she was in danger because of it. David pulled her closer. "I'm sorry you're caught up in this." She shook her head. "I made my choice the moment I refused to walk away." "But David, how far will this go?" His jaw tightened. "Until my stepmother gets what she wants. And that will never happen." Tunde returned quickly. "The driver is on his way. We need to stay low till he gets here." They found a bench in a darker corner of the park and sat down. Juliet tried to calm her nerves. The air felt thick, like something was about to happen. Minutes passed. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Tunde's phone beeped. He's close. Just then, headlights appeared in the distance. A black car. David stood up immediately. "That's not our ride." Juliet's stomach dropped. The car slowed down. Then, the back window rolled down slightly. David grabbed Juliet's hand. "Run." Before she could process what was happening, he was already pulling her with him, Tunde right behind them. Footsteps. Voices. Someone was following. Juliet's heart pounded as they dashed into a narrow street, disappearing into the night. Juliet's legs burned as she ran. The cold night air slapped against her skin, but she didn't stop. David held her hand tightly, leading the way through the narrow street. Tunde ran beside them, his breathing heavy. Behind them, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed. The men were still following. David made a sharp turn into an alley. This way. Juliet didn't think, she just followed. The alley smelled damp, and trash was scattered around, but there was no time to care. They reached the end, where an old fence blocked the way. David quickly climbed over and reached for Juliet. She placed her foot on a broken brick and pushed herself up. He grabbed her waist and helped her down on the other side. Tunde was next, but just as he climbed up, a voice shouted from the entrance of the alley. "There they are!" Tunde jumped down fast, landing beside them. "We need to keep moving." David led them through another quiet street, this one darker than the last. The houses looked abandoned. Juliet struggled to catch her breath. Where are we going?" "A safe place," David replied without slowing down. Tunde glanced back. "I think we lost them." David finally stopped when they reached an old, rusted gate. He knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked twice again. Seconds later, the gate creaked open. A woman peered out, her face hidden in the dim light. David stepped forward. "It's me. Let us in." Without a word, the woman pushed the gate open wider. Juliet hesitated for a moment but followed David inside. The gate shut behind them, sealing them in. For the first time that night, Juliet felt like she could finally breathe. But something told her this was only the beginning. Juliet stepped cautiously into the compound. The air smelled of damp earth, and the walls were covered in patches of peeling paint. The woman who had opened the gate watched them in silence before turning to David. "You brought trouble here," she said in a low voice. David sighed. "We had no choice, Auntie Ife. They were right behind us." The woman shook her head but stepped aside. "Come inside before anyone sees you." Juliet exchanged a glance with Tunde before following David into the small house. Inside, the place was dimly lit, the furniture old but well kept. Auntie Ife locked the door behind them and leaned against it. "Start talking," she said. David ran a hand through his hair. "It's my stepmother. She won't stop until she gets rid of me." Auntie Ife's eyes darkened. "She tried before. I warned you she would try again." Juliet listened quietly. She had been dragged into something much bigger than she expected. Auntie Ife turned to her. "And you? Who are you?" Juliet hesitated. I helped him when he had nowhere to go." The woman studied her for a moment before nodding. "You have a good heart. But good hearts get broken in this kind of fight." David stepped closer. "Auntie, we just need a place to hide for the night. By morning, we'll leave." She sighed. "You'll stay here tonight. But at sunrise, you must go." Tunde exhaled in relief. "Thank you." Auntie Ife didn't respond. She simply walked into another room, leaving them alone. Juliet sat on the old couch, trying to calm her nerves. "What now?" David sat beside her. "We rest. Tomorrow, we figure out our next move." Tunde paced near the window. "I'll keep watch." Juliet leaned back, her mind racing. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. The night was quiet, but Juliet couldn't sleep. The tiny room felt too heavy with thoughts. David lay beside her on a mat, eyes closed but not truly resting. Tunde sat near the window, occasionally peeking through the curtain. Juliet sighed. "David, what exactly does your stepmother want?" His voice was low. "She wants me gone. For good." Tunde turned from the window. "It's not just about you, David. It's about the company. She wants full control." Juliet frowned. "But you already left everything for her and your half-brother. What more does she want?" David shook his head. "Power isn't satisfied with enough." Auntie Ife appeared in the doorway, her wrapper tied tight around her chest. "There's trouble." Tunde stood. "What is it?" She lowered her voice. "A car has been parked outside for too long. The driver isn't moving, just sitting there." David's jaw tightened. "They found us." Juliet's heart pounded. "What do we do?" Auntie Ife glanced at the back door. "There's a way out, but you have to leave now." Tunde grabbed a small bag. "Let's go." David took Juliet's hand. "Stay close to me." They followed Auntie Ife through the dark kitchen and out into a narrow alley. The air was cold, and the sound of distant voices made Juliet's skin crawl. Auntie Ife whispered, "Head straight down this path. You'll reach an open road. Find a way out of here." Juliet hesitated. "What about you?" Auntie Ife smiled faintly. "I can take care of myself." David squeezed her hand. "Let's move." They ran. Their footsteps echoed against the walls, blending with the night. The road was near, but danger was closer. The night air was cold, but Juliet barely felt it. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears as she ran beside David and Tunde. The narrow alley opened to a quiet street, the only sound coming from distant traffic. David glanced back. Nobody's following yet. Tunde pulled his cap lower. "They're not stupid. They won't chase recklessly." Juliet swallowed hard. "So what do we do now?" David's voice was steady. "We need to get out of this area before morning. She won't stop until I'm gone for good." Juliet's stomach twisted. "Why does she hate you this much?" David exhaled sharply. "Because I exist. She wanted my father's wealth for her own son. I was just an obstacle." A car approached slowly from a distance. Tunde tensed. That might be one of them. They stepped back into the shadows. The car rolled past, but the driver was watching. Juliet felt her hands turn cold. David's grip tightened on hers. "We need to move. Now." Tunde spotted a small keek parked down the street. "If we can get to that before they turn around." Before he could finish, the car suddenly braked. The tires screeched. David pulled Juliet. "Run!" They sprinted. The driver jumped out, shouting into a phone. Another car appeared at the corner. Juliet's chest burned as she ran. The keek was their only chance. Tunde reached it first, yanking the door open. "Get in!" Juliet dived in, David right behind her. Tunde shouted at the driver. "Drive! Now!" The keek sped off just as the men reached them. Juliet looked back and saw their angry faces disappearing behind the dust. David leaned back, breathing hard. That was too close. Juliet grabbed his hand. "Where do we go now?" Tunde answered, eyes still scanning the road. "Somewhere they'll never expect." The keek moved fast, weaving through quiet streets. The driver didn't ask questions, just focused on getting them far away. Juliet's breathing was unsteady. Her hands shook as she wiped sweat from her forehead. She turned to David. Where exactly are we going? David's jaw was tight. Somewhere safe. A place they won't expect. Tunde looked uneasy. We can't keep running forever. David ran a hand through his hair. I know. But right now, we need to disappear. Juliet sighed. Her life had changed so much in a short time. She met David when he had nothing, helped him, and now they were on the run because of his past. The keek stopped near a small lodge at the outskirts of town. David paid the driver, and they quickly got out. Tunde scanned the area. This place looks abandoned. David nodded. That's the point. No cameras, no questions. They walked in, and an old man behind the counter barely looked up. David dropped some money on the desk. 2 rooms. The man pocketed the cash and gave them keys without a word. Inside, the rooms were small but clean. Juliet sat on the bed, rubbing her temples. How long do we stay here? David sat beside her. Just until I figure out our next move. Tunde leaned against the door. David, we need to face this. Running won't solve anything. David sighed. I know. But if we make the wrong move, we won't survive to fix anything. Juliet placed a hand on his. Whatever happens, I'm with you. David looked into her eyes. I won't let anything happen to you. Tunde cleared his throat. We should rest. Tomorrow, we plan. Juliet lay back, but sleep didn't come easily. Too many thoughts, too many dangers ahead. She only knew one thing, this wasn't over yet. The morning air was cold. Juliet sat by the small window, watching the empty road outside. Her mind was restless. David was still asleep, his breathing steady. Tunde, on the other hand, was pacing. David needs to decide fast. We can't keep hiding. Juliet sighed. You think I don't know? But what's the alternative? Walk back and let them catch us. Tunde ran a hand over his face. We need backup. Someone we can trust. David stared, stretching as he opened his eyes. I heard that, he muttered. And I agree. Juliet turned to him. Do you have someone in mind? David hesitated. There's one person. But it's risky. Tunde scoffed. What isn't risky at this point? David sat up. Chika. Juliet's eyes widened. The same Chika who almost got you arrested. David nodded. He owes me. Big time. Tunde shook his head. That guy is unpredictable. David smirked. That's why they won't expect it. Juliet frowned. What if he betrays us? David exhaled. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. Tunde checked his watch. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, don't say I didn't warn you. David grabbed his phone. Let's go find Chika. The drive to Chika's place was long and silent. Juliet kept glancing at David, but he didn't say a word. Tunde, who was driving, tapped the steering wheel impatiently. We're really doing this? Tunde finally asked. David nodded. We don't have a choice. Juliet folded her arms. I still don't trust him. David sighed. I don't either, but he's our best option. They reached a small compound with an iron gate. Tunde honked twice. Moments later, a rough-looking man peeped through a small opening. His eyes narrowed before he pushed the gate open. Inside, Chika was lounging on a plastic chair, a toothpick in his mouth. He grinned when he saw them. David, David. Long time, my guy. He stood up, arms wide. David didn't smile. We need to talk. Chuka chuckled. Ah. Straight to business. No, how are you? Tunde rolled his eyes. You think we came for gist? Chuka shrugged. Fine. Talk. David stepped closer. We need your help. Chuka smirked. That sounds expensive. Juliet frowned. We're not here to beg. Chuka turned to her. And who is this beauty? David's jaw tightened. Don't. Chuka laughed. Relax, man. He sat back down. Tell me exactly what you want. David exhaled. We need a way out. Somewhere safe. Chuka tapped his chin. And what do I get in return? Juliet spoke before David could. Your life. Chuka's smile faded. David leaned in. You owe me, Chuka. I saved you once. Now it's time to return the favor. Chuka was silent for a while. Then he sighed. All right. I have a place. Tunde eyed him. Where? Chuka grinned. You'll see. Chuka led them through the back of his compound, squeezing through a narrow path between two buildings. The air was damp, the ground uneven. Juliet stepped carefully, watching where she placed her feet. You sure about this place? Tunde asked, side-eyeing Chuka. Chuka chuckled. You think I'll set you up? David didn't answer. He just followed. They reached a rusted metal door. Chuka knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. A few seconds later, the door creaked open, and a tall, slim man with sharp eyes peered out. Inside, the man said, stepping aside. Juliet hesitated. Something about the place felt wrong, but David had already stepped in. She had no choice but to follow. The room smelled of dust and something else she couldn't place. A single bulb flickered above, casting strange shadows. Chuka turned to them. This is Kelechi. He handles situations. Kelechi crossed his arms. Who are they? David spoke up. People who need a way out. Kelechi smirked. That's never cheap. Juliet clenched her fists. We're not here to play games. Kelechi looked at her, then back at Chuka. You vouch for them? Chuka sighed. I do. Kelechi studied them for a moment, then nodded. Fine. I'll make the call. Tunde exhaled. Finally. Kelechi picked up an old phone and dialed. It's me. We have a situation. Juliet exchanged glances with David. Whatever they were getting into, there was no turning back now. Kelechi ended the call and turned to them. You have 1 hour. Be at the warehouse near Apo Junction. David nodded. We'll be there. Juliet swallowed hard. Are you sure we can trust him? Chuka let out a short laugh. You don't have a choice. Tunde shifted his weight. What happens at the warehouse? Kelechi smirked. That's where you disappear. Juliet didn't like the sound of that. But they were too deep in this mess to pull back. They left through the back door. Outside, the night air felt heavy. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. We need to move fast, David said, leading the way. Juliet's mind raced. Who was waiting for them at the warehouse? What if this was a trap? Tunde tapped her shoulder. You're overthinking. Am I? She muttered. They walked in silence until they reached the roadside. Chika whistled, and a small, battered car pulled up. "That's our ride," he said. Juliet hesitated, but David opened the door. "Let's go." She took a deep breath and got in. The car smelled of smoke and something bitter. The driver, a man with tired eyes, glanced at them through the mirror. "You sure about this?" David's jaw tightened. "Just drive." As the car rolled forward, Juliet glanced at the city lights fading behind them. She had a feeling that once they reached the warehouse, nothing would ever be the same again. The car moved through the quiet streets, headlights cutting through the night. Nobody spoke. The tension sat heavy in the air. Juliet gripped the edge of her seat, her heart beating fast. As they neared the warehouse, the driver slowed down. "This is as far as I go." David nodded and handed him a few bills. They stepped out, the cool night air brushing against their skin. The warehouse loomed ahead, its metal walls covered in dirt and rust. A single light flickered above the entrance. Chika knocked twice, then stepped back. The door creaked open. A man stood there, his face partly hidden by shadows. "You came." Kelechi stepped forward. "Where's the package?" The man waved them inside. They exchanged glances before stepping in. The air smelled damp, the floor rough under their feet. Juliet's eyes scanned the room. Stacks of wooden crates lined the walls, and in the middle of the space stood a single chair. On it sat a man, tied up, his face swollen. David's breath hitched. "What's this?" The man in the shadows smirked. "Insurance." Tunde clenched his fists. "You didn't say anything about this." Kelechi shrugged. "Things change." Juliet's stomach tightened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Juliet's fingers curled into her palm. She took a slow step forward, eyes fixed on the man tied to the chair. His breathing was rough, his head hanging low. David moved beside her. "Who is he?" Kelechi smirked. "Someone who owed a debt." Juliet's jaw tightened. "This isn't what we agreed on." The man in the shadows chuckled. "You're in too deep to start asking questions now." Tunde took a step closer. "Let him go." The man lifted his head slightly, blood trickling from his lip. His eyes met Juliet's, desperate. Kelechi sighed and shook his head. "This is business. You want out? Walk away now." David clenched his fists. "We're not leaving without him." A thick silence filled the room. Then, a voice from the corner. "Neither are you." Juliet's breath caught. The door slammed shut behind them. Juliet's heart pounded. She turned sharply, eyes darting toward the door. 4 men stood there, their faces unreadable. Kelechi leaned against the table, tapping his fingers. "You should have left while you had the chance." David's jaw tightened. "We're not afraid of you." One of the men chuckled. "You should be." The tied-up man groaned. Juliet could see his fingers twitch slightly. He was weak but still conscious. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Let him go, Kelechi. You don't need to do this." Kelechi smirked. "And if I say no?" Juliet's hands clenched. She glanced at David. They needed a way out. The room was too tight, and the men at the door were blocking their only exit. Tunde shifted beside her. "We don't have to fight." One of the men stepped forward. "But we want to." Then, without warning, the lights flickered. The room plunged into brief darkness. And that was all the time they needed. Juliet didn't waste time. The moment the lights flickered, she grabbed David's hand and pulled him toward the window. Kelechi cursed. Get them! One of the men lunged, but Tunde swung a chair at him, sending him stumbling. Juliet yanked at the window latch, but it was stuck. David slammed his shoulder against it, and the glass shattered. Jump! Juliet shouted. David climbed through first, landing hard on the ground outside. Juliet followed, her heart racing. Tunde was right behind her. Shouts filled the air as the men scrambled after them. Juliet didn't stop running. David grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the narrow alley beside the building. They're coming! Tunde panted. Juliet glanced back. Kelechi's men were close. Too close. Then, out of nowhere, a car screeched to a stop in front of them. The driver's side door flew open. Get in, a familiar voice yelled. Juliet didn't hesitate. She dove into the car, David and Tunde right behind her. The moment the door slammed shut, the driver hit the gas. As they sped off, Juliet finally looked up. Her eyes widened in shock. The driver was the last person she ever expected to see. Juliet's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. You, she gasped. Ifini gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw clenched. No time for shock. Hold on. The tires screeched as he took a sharp turn. David groaned from the backseat, still catching his breath. Tunde kept glancing behind. They're following us, Tunde muttered. Juliet's chest tightened. How did you even? No questions now, Ifini cut in. I saw what was happening. You think I'd just sit back? Juliet looked at him, still trying to understand. Ifini had been missing for months. Now, he appeared just when they needed him most. They have guns, David said. If they catch us. They won't, Ifini interrupted. Juliet turned to check. Kelechi's men were gaining on them, their car speeding through traffic like a shadow hunting them down. I have an idea, Tunde said. Ifini nodded. Say it quickly. There's a market road ahead. If we enter, we can lose them in the crowd. That's crazy, David said. We could crash. Do we have a choice? Juliet asked. Ifini's hands tightened on the wheel. Hold on. Without another word, he swerved into the market road, sending people scattering. Horns blared. People shouted. Juliet gritted her teeth as the car swayed dangerously. Behind them, Kelechi's men hesitated. Their car slowed. Tunde let out a shaky breath. I think we lost them. Juliet wasn't so sure. Something told her this wasn't over yet. Juliet's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her seat. Ifini kept driving, his eyes fixed ahead. David groaned in pain. I need a hospital. No hospitals, Ifini said. They'll be looking for us there. Juliet turned to David. His shirt was soaked in blood. Then where? Tunde pressed a cloth against David's wound. I know a place. Someone who can help. Ifini nodded. Guide me. They drove in silence, the tension thick. Juliet kept glancing back, expecting to see Kelechi's men appear at any moment. After a few turns, Tunde pointed to a small compound. Here. Ifini pulled in and killed the engine. Juliet and Tunde helped David out. A woman in her 50s opened the door, her eyes widening. Tunde? What is this? No time, Mama Esther, Tunde said. Please, help us. The woman sighed and stepped aside. Bring him in. Juliet followed, her mind racing. They were safe for now, but she knew Kelechi wouldn't stop. Mama Esther worked quickly, cleaning David's wound with steady hands. He winced but didn't complain. Juliet stood by, her heart pounding. This will hurt, Mama Esther warned, pressing herbs into the wound. David clenched his teeth, gripping the edge of the wooden bench. Ifini paced. We can't stay here long. Tunde leaned against the door. Kelechi's men are everywhere. We have to be smart. Juliet wiped sweat from her forehead. We need a plan. Mama Esther tied a bandage around David's chest. He needs rest, but he'll survive. David exhaled, his face pale. We can't run forever. Tunde nodded. No, we finish this. Silence filled the room. They all knew what had to be done. Kelechi had to be stopped. The moral of the story is that life has a way of repaying people for their actions, whether good or bad. It teaches that patience, kindness, and resilience always win in the end, no matter how unfair life seems at the moment. Betrayal and greed lead to downfall. Those who scheme against others for personal gain eventually face consequences. True strength is in endurance. The one who stays strong and keeps pushing forward will eventually overcome obstacles. Karma is real. Every action, whether good or evil, comes back in one way or another. Genuine love and kindness are always rewarded. The people who truly care, even when others abandon you, are the ones who matter. Would you like me to refine or add more depth to the moral?